Sometime this spring, in a yard not unlike yours, a storm will shake a tree hard enough to knock a baby squirrel loose from its nest, and it will land on the grass below, tiny, furless, or barely furred, eyes still closed, crying out in a thin, urgent squeak that sounds exactly like an emergency to anyone who hears it. Almost everyone who finds a baby squirrel like this reaches for their phone within minutes, searching for the nearest wildlife rescue, convinced that every passing second matters and that scooping the kit up immediately is the only responsible thing to do. In a genuinely large share of these cases, that instinct, however caring, works against the animal rather than for it, because the single most effective rescue already available to that kit isn't a person with a cardboard box. It's the mother squirrel who, more often than people realize, is already listening for exactly that cry from somewhere close by, working her own version of a rescue that most people never give her the chance to finish. Most people who find a fallen kit assume the worst almost instantly, picturing a mother that's died, fled, or simply given up, leaving her baby to fend for itself on the open ground. It's an understandable leap. A tiny, blind, defenseless animal lying alone in the grass looks like textbook abandonment to almost anyone encountering it for the first time, and every instinct built around human caregiving says the correct response to that image is immediate, hands-on intervention. It tends to play out the same way in yards everywhere. Kids playing outside after a storm hear the crying first, follow it to the base of a tree, and come running for a parent with news that a baby squirrel has fallen and needs help right away.
The adult arrives to find exactly what was described. A tiny, motionless kit crying in the grass, no mother visible anywhere in the branches above. Phones come out. Someone starts searching for the nearest wildlife rehabilitator, or a how-to guide on hand-raising a baby squirrel, already halfway to a decision before anyone has stopped to ask whether the mother might simply not have gotten there yet. This is a deliberately similar story to the one this channel told recently about baby rabbits, another familiar backyard animal, another well-meaning human instinct capable of doing real harm, and another situation with genuine, immediate stakes attached to getting it right. But the mechanism underneath this one is different and worth understanding on its own terms, since a squirrel mother's relationship with her nest looks almost nothing like a rabbit does. Along the way, you'll discover exactly how a mother squirrel finds and retrieves a fallen kit, why she sometimes moves an entire litter between multiple nests as a matter of routine, how long it's actually reasonable to wait and watch before assuming reunion won't happen, what real warning signs actually look like, and why attempting to feed a kit yourself carries a danger most people have never been told about at all. By the end, that crying kit on the lawn is going to call for a very different first response than the one most people reach for automatically. Picture the moment the way it usually plays out. Wind picks up or a branch cracks, or a sibling kit accidentally jostles a nest that's already a little too crowded, and a small, barely furred animal tumbles out and lands hard in the grass below a mature oak or maple.
It lies there stunned for a moment, then begins crying, a thin, high, repeated distress call carrying further than its tiny size would suggest, the same call it would make inside the nest if a sibling rolled onto it or the temperature dropped too far. Someone in the yard hears it, follows the sound, and finds exactly what the crying promised: a helpless baby squirrel completely alone on the ground, with no adult anywhere in sight and no obvious way for it to get back up into the tree on its own. The natural next move for almost anyone in that position is to assume rescue means immediate removal, gathering the kit up, wrapping it in a towel, and rushing to find a wildlife center, a vet, or at minimum a warm box indoors while a plan gets worked out. It's the same instinct that drove so many well-meaning people to remove healthy baby rabbits from perfectly intact nests, and it comes from exactly the same place: a sincere unwillingness to leave a defenseless animal to whatever happens next. Wildlife rehabilitation centers describe fielding an enormous volume of these exact calls every spring, right alongside the baby rabbit calls, arriving in the same predictable seasonal wave whenever storms and young, still clumsy litters overlap, sometimes even from the very same household within the same week. It would be entirely reasonable to act on that instinct immediately. The scene genuinely does look dire, and nobody would fault a person for wanting to help as fast as possible. But wildlife rehabilitators who handle these calls constantly describe a meaningfully different picture than the one people usually imagine, one in which the mother squirrel is very often still nearby, still capable, and crucially, still actively searching for exactly the sound her fallen kit is making. It helps to understand just how much growing a squirrel kit still has ahead of it at the point most falls happen, since that context shapes exactly why the mother's involvement matters so much. Kits are born blind, hairless, and entirely dependent, and they stay that way for weeks, opening their eyes only around a month of age and not growing a full coat of fur until sometime after that, a considerably longer runway to independence than the baby rabbits covered previously, and one that makes ongoing maternal care, rather than a single early feeding, essential to survival. Unlike the rabbit mother covered in the channel's prior related documentary, who protects her litter largely by staying away from the nest for most of the day, a mother squirrel maintains a far more continuously attentive relationship with her young, typically remaining within the same tree or a small cluster of nearby trees throughout the day rather than ranging far off. When a kit falls and begins crying, a mother squirrel that's nearby and aware of the fall will very often descend from the canopy, track the sound and scent down to the exact spot on the ground, pick the kit up gently by the scruff of its neck in her mouth, in essentially the same way a mother cat carries her kittens, and climb back up to deliver it safely to the nest, often within remarkably little time once she's confident the area is safe. This isn't a rare, lucky outcome. It's a well-documented, fairly routine part of how squirrels manage exactly this kind of accident, repeated in yards and parks everywhere every single spring, without most people ever witnessing the successful half of the story, since a completed retrieval tends to happen quietly, without an audience, precisely because a wary mother waits until the coast seems genuinely clear before she ever comes down. What makes that retrieval even more remarkable is that the destination isn't always the original nest at all. Squirrels commonly maintain more than one dray within their territory specifically as backup shelter, a practical hedge against a single nest flooding in heavy rain, becoming infested with parasites, being discovered by a predator, or otherwise stopping being safe. The same kind of contingency planning that shows up again and again once you start looking closely at squirrel behavior throughout the rest of the year. A mother who decides her current nest situation has become risky, whether because of a fall, a disturbance, or simply because she senses danger nearby, will relocate her entire litter one kit at a time, carrying each one individually by the scruff to a different, safer dray elsewhere in the same territory, a process that can take a mother several trips and a fair amount of time to complete, depending on how many kits are in the litter and how far apart the two nests happen to be. Anyone who happens to watch this relocation in progress rather than a single fall will see the same mother appear, disappear with one kit, and return again minutes later for the next, a visible pattern that makes far more sense once you know what it actually is. A fallen kit and a mother nowhere in immediate sight isn't automatically evidence of abandonment. It can just as easily be a single, interrupted step in the middle of an already planned move, with the mother simply not back to that exact spot yet. None of this means retrieval happens the instant a kit hits the ground, which is exactly why patience matters here in a very specific, practical way. Wildlife rehabilitators commonly recommend giving a mother a genuine window of time, often stretching from the moment of discovery until dusk, before assuming a reunion isn't going to happen, since locating a fallen kit and judging the surrounding area safe enough to approach takes real time, especially with people, pets, or other activities still nearby, all of which reads to a cautious mother as reasons to hold back and keep watching rather than descend. Rushing to intervene within the first few minutes eliminates a chance that, given a few quiet hours, would very often have resolved itself without anyone needing to do anything at all, turning what could have been a brief, invisible reunion into a permanent separation purely because nobody waited long enough to find out. A wait that feels agonizingly long to a worried person standing in the yard is, from the mother's perspective, a perfectly ordinary amount of time to assess a situation before risking a descent into the open. There's a small but genuinely useful detail worth knowing if a kit has clearly been on cool ground for a while before being found. A chilled kit can struggle to vocalize as loudly or as persistently as a warm one, and a weak distress call travels a shorter distance and carries less urgency, meaningfully reducing the odds that a mother searching from a few trees away will actually locate it in time, since her search depends almost entirely on being able to hear and place exactly where that call is coming from. Rehabilitators often recommend gently warming an apparently uninjured but cold kit. Close body warmth or a warm, not hot, cloth works well, before placing it in a shallow, ventilated container lined with something soft at the base of the tree it fell from, then stepping well back and leaving the area quiet.
A mother is highly unlikely to approach while people or pets remain nearby, so genuinely giving her space is just as important as giving her time, and the two pieces of advice work together rather than as separate optional steps. It's worth being just as clear about when waiting stops being the right call, since not every fallen kit does get retrieved, and assuming every situation will resolve itself on its own isn't good guidance either. Visible injury or bleeding, a kit that stays cold and unresponsive even after being gently warmed, clear evidence that a predator has already found the area, and obviously destroyed or removed nest tree, or several hours passing under otherwise good conditions with no retrieval at all, are all legitimate, serious reasons to stop waiting and contact a licensed wildlife rehabilitator rather than continuing to hope for a reunion that isn't coming. None of these signs require special expertise to recognize.
They simply require someone to actually check for them before defaulting straight to removal, the same brief pause that made all the difference in the channel's prior baby rabbit story. If a kit genuinely does need to be raised by hand, there's a specific, serious danger worth knowing about that most people have never been warned about at all before they try to help on their own. Bottle feeding a very young squirrel kit incorrectly, wrong formula, wrong flow rate, wrong body position during feeding, carries a real risk of the liquid being aspirated directly into the lungs rather than swallowed properly, a complication that can be fatal and that experienced wildlife rehabilitators are specifically trained to avoid through proper technique, correct formula, and equipment most households simply don't have on hand. A kit's swallowing reflex at this young age is delicate enough that even a well-meaning, careful person following an online tutorial can get it wrong in a way that a trained rehabilitator, working with the right tools, correct formula, and proper technique, would never risk, since professional rehabilitators are specifically trained to recognize exactly the signs that feeding is going wrong before any harm occurs. This isn't included to frighten anyone away from ever helping. Put the whole picture together, and that crying kit alone in the grass stops looking like a situation that only a person can fix. It's closer to the opposite. The visible middle of a rescue sequence a mother squirrel is often already well underway completing on her own, one that depends on exactly the kind of space and time a rushed, well-meaning intervention tends to remove before it has any chance to finish, replacing a quiet, natural reunion with a permanent, unnecessary separation.
Which changes what genuinely helping actually looks like the next time this happens near you. It was never really a choice between rescuing the kit or abandoning it to whatever comes next. It's closer to a choice between two different kinds of rescue: a mother's own retrieval, quiet and largely invisible, or a hands-on human intervention that, however well meant, works best as a backup plan rather than the very first move, held in reserve for exactly the situations where it's genuinely needed instead of used automatically for everyone. The next time you hear that thin, urgent cry coming from somewhere low in the grass beneath a tree, it's worth remembering what that sound is actually doing. It isn't just distress. It's a signal aimed at exactly the animal best equipped to answer it, broadcast in a call shaped by evolution specifically to reach a mother's ears rather than a human's. And the most genuinely helpful thing a person can usually do is create the quiet, patient conditions that let that signal actually be heard. That's the part of a spring backyard emergency that almost nobody has been told clearly enough to act on differently in the moment it actually counts. A mistake made for entirely good reasons, by people who simply never had the chance to learn what was actually happening a few branches overhead, listening just as anxiously as anyone standing below. If you've ever found a fallen baby squirrel and rushed to intervene, or hesitated and weren't sure whether that was the right call, you're in exactly the same position as most people who've ever faced this. We'd love to know what you did and what you do differently with this in mind.
And if this changes how you or someone you know responds the next time a kit turns up crying on the lawn, consider sharing it directly with them, the same way we hope the baby rabbit story reached someone before they needed it too, this exact kind of knowledge mattering far more in the moment it's needed than it ever does after.